Okay, this is episode 50 of Summoning Insight. 50, the nickel. Yeehaw! Monty's actually... I'm now contractually applied. I have to talk like that at all times on all of his shows because he doesn't think that gimmicks get a bit old and a bit tired. But anyway, speaking of which, what's interesting is, you can sort of see when people are going through certain phases of their life, like what kind of state of mind they're in. You know that guy who, like what was perfectly portrayed in the movie American Beauty. Okay, a guy who goes through a midlife crisis, and so he gets himself that like sort of sports car he'd always wanted. He starts smoking weed. He starts listening to Pink Floyd again, connecting with his youth again, trying to find that lost person that he could have been. So speaking of which, Monte apparently makes so much money in esports that he was like, okay, well, I'm already like a caster. I do shows. Like, I pay for an expensive apartment in Korea. Like, I buy fine clothes. I've upgraded the whiskey I drink, the cigars I smoke. Is there any other way I could waste my money? Is there anything that's a surefire in esports to lose money? And someone was like, why don't you start being an owner? And he was like, boy, yeah, that is pretty high risk, but I guess the rewards are pretty good. They're like, no, just own a team that isn't even in a league yet, like just in NA LCS or something. And apparently that's what you did. So how's that working out for you, Monty?
Well, it's all part of my career suicide plan. This is a really long-term plan that I'm running right now. The first step was to be associating myself with you,
I see.
And all of that. So it's gonna be a slow decline, but I decided to accelerate it just a little bit by owning a team.
But the problem is, my friend, I know what's happened here. Much like the movie Brewster's Millions, where he had to try and give away millions of dollars in order to get a bigger reward of getting billions that he would inherit from his great granduncle or something. You've tried to commit career suicide by being associated with me, but then actually it's like supernovaed your career even more, to the extent that if people look up in the top right-hand corner here, they'll see a logo for Alpha Draft, which is a wonderful place that if people wanted to play fantasy esports, such as League of Legends, watch leagues like LCK, NA LCS, EU LCS, play, win money. People won over $10,000 last week. The fact I'm even doing this right now, Monty, means that you're not committing suicide. It's the opposite. I'm bringing you to life, if anything. I'm like Evanescence or something.
Are you familiar with The Producers, the musical with Mel Brooks?
Okay, sure, yeah.
You know how they like accidentally make a star play out of Springtime with Hitler? Yeah. That's what this is like.
So it's like Springtime with League of Legends Hitler. Yeah, okay.
That's right, and that's how I compared you to Hitler.
Yeah, well done. It's better that you make the first one of those jokes than me. Anyway, so our guest this week, what's interesting is I always love the context of how I set the guests up. So when I set this guest up last time, it was almost sort of like a pity invitation. We were like, okay, I heard that this guy like once made up the term like slow push like 4 years ago that no one even knows about, and then also his region, Taipei Assassins did win something like 3 years ago, so we could ask him about that, I guess. And then on the side we sort of asked him like, yeah, what about that league you do, like GP, it's actually LMS, what's that about? We love that, sounds great, all that. Now talk about that, but we will never once again mention it. And don't worry, Clement, in every other episode we've never once mentioned LMS. We've never even got into what teams play there. Even for MSI it was more like, wow, that AHQ team, huh? Yeah, they're a team. And then on to the other ones. We didn't even pay attention. They made the top four. We spent more time talking about TSM than a team that made the top four of the tournament. But that's the genius of this episode, Clement. You get to arrive in your glory and do this episode in a region that now matters. Like, that's the thing. Now your region placed above NA in an international tournament of the best international teams. So hello, Clement Chu, inventor of the term slow push and caster for that LMS league that I said before, but who will now be relevant on this episode. Hello.
Hello, and it's great to feel relevant.
So let's start there, actually. I want to kind of get the context of where we were last time in the show to how we got to where we are now. So actually, there was 2 tournaments that happened before then. And the first one people will forget. This is actually when I actually remembered you again. I remembered you existed, because I mean, obviously, when I go back and watch old World Elite VODs from 2012, then I also remember that you exist. But it was when actually IEM was going on, the IEM World Championship. Because I remember everyone else was seeing like, wow, Team WE is like upsetting GE Tigers. Oh my God, what's happening? Oh my God, TSM's making it to the final. But actually on my Twitter feed, it was Clement Chu and a bunch of people from the Taiwan region who were just going apeshit like, yeah, I told you motherfuckers, what's up now, bitch? Because like Flash Wolves, Yoi Flash Wolves had managed to not only, like obviously we had them built to be probably the worst in the group because they were in the group with GE Tigers, Cloud9, SK, like strong teams. But actually they beat Cloud9, they beat SK in the rematch. Then in the first game of the semi-finals, by the way, Monty, you'll note that when he was like, yeah, what up, bitch, was like after the first game of the semi-finals when they beat TSM. So he was in his mind like, oh my God, they're going to beat TSM, they're going to go to the final, they're going to win the tournament, they're the best in the world, it's TPL all over again. Like, so what actually happened, Clement? Was that team Flash Wolves, was that like a fluke in any way, that run to the semis and being the only team to win a game off TSM? Were they actually that good at that point in time?
Well, at that point, I think they were pretty decent. In that tournament, I did place them above C9. I think their win against C9 was very solid. It was kind of shaky. Hyde did some really questionable engages. We actually ranked them over SK internally. We thought they would do good, but we didn't really have high hopes against TSM, to be honest. And
do you have some headphones you can wear?
We got a little bit carried away after the first game.
Anyway, continue on, Clement. So you were just saying that, like, internally you had them ranked above SK. Let me just stop you right there. Why did you have them ranked above SK? SK were the best team in Europe. Well, at the time, they didn't... H2K was on their 6th streak with Kasing. That's all true. Fnatic was a strong team. But SK was still ranked number 1 at the time of the tournament. Why did you have them above SK?
Because we thought that we could target Forgiven pretty easily with Maple. At that time, Forgiven was only playing like...
Move to your right a bit, please.
Or
left, left, I mean. Just sit back in your chair. You're not on the screen right now. Oh, gosh. I can't handle it, Monty. There must be a producer. There must. Okay, anyway. Continue on about Forgiven.
Okay, so Forgiven was playing Graves and Lucian at that time.
Yep.
Both very short-range AD carries, and we thought that against Maple, that would be kind of it would produce like a lot of trouble for him to continue to output damage, because Maple is really good in assassins, and if you're playing mainly these short-range AD carries, it's going to be a lot of trouble to keep Forgiven alive. So we thought we could keep him down, and at that time, SK was playing like a very greedy lane swap type scenario, and at least we thought that Flash Wolves would be able to deal with that lane swap fairly well.
So wait a second, let me stop right there.
Okay.
Let me ask Monty this then. So what he's describing there about how to stop Forgiven, if we remember at the time, nobody had figured out how to stop Forgiven. Nobody knew. Like, even when he was playing these champions, he would just beast every time he played them, basically. Graves and Lucian, those are the two that he was just winning every game on. It sounds like in what Clement's describing here is like you don't even necessarily have to ban those champions. You can even deal with them as champions. Why do you think no one figured that out?
I mean, I don't know. It is especially interesting that the Europeans who were scrimming against them didn't figure it out, right? That's kind of very mysterious.
Do you think other teams figured it out in this tournament?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's what we saw after even the Flash Wolves themselves did the same bans as the Tigers did. The team then known as the GE Tigers, now known as the Coup Tigers, right? The Coup Tigers just did it as a one-off in their one game, won pretty easily, and then everyone else started doing that for the rest of the event.
So, okay, so Flash Wolves managed to beat SK, but presumably you weren't expecting them to get the win off TSM, for example.
Yeah, I didn't think that would be an easy thing to do. Our hopes rested on probably Maple and Karsa beating out Bjergesen and who's that? Santorum, yeah, sorry. Forgot him after like MSI. I thought those, if they were going to win, they would have to win that 2v2. And I thought Maple had a chance, but as things turned out, he actually got solo killed in lane, and it didn't go so hot after that.
How do you think they were able to win game 1 then? Since they were the only team to actually win a game. I mean, WE came close, but they were the only ones to actually record a single win against TSM in that tournament, you know, when TSM looked at their best.
I need to like kind of remind myself what happened in that one. I'm checking up their ban picks right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Lee Sin, Corky, Nidalee.
See, I would have thought this would be right on the tip of your tongue. You know, I would assume everyone in Taiwan, like the only 10 games you all rewatch is like Taipei Assassins Season 2, and then that one win off TSM, and then AHQ at MSI. I assume that's just on reruns 24/7. I don't even believe LMS is shown anymore. They just show those on reruns. They're like,
Come on, there was
let's
some
relive
IPL
our
5
glory.
game. There was some IPL 5.
That's why I said Season 2. Well, I guess that's post Season 2, but okay. Do you have any memory of what happened in Game 1 there? I just remember watching that and being like, holy shit, Flash Wolves is actually dumpstering them like they're going to win the series. At which point the glee spread through me, and maybe that's what jinxed it at that point, As soon as happiness came into my life, it was taken away.
It looks like they got a lot of the champions they're really good on that point. NL has his best performance on Lucian. They gave Zed to Maple. Karsa on...
was this where the top laner was playing...
Aurelia.
Oh, yeah, he was playing Aurelia.
Yeah.
That was the game where he didn't get any farm, but still did stuff anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's actually a pretty good common description of Stake as a player, but it was particularly pronounced this game.
Yeah, I think it was at 10 CS at 10 minutes. That was the biggest memory point in that game, and they still managed to win just because he was able to dive their lanes continuously. And this is a very pronounced feature for Flash Wolves. This is what they do when they have Stake in the lineup, is they try to play the lane swap and they try to constantly dive you. And afterwards, they try to find a really long lane for Stake to farm up and get back into the game again. For this game particularly, I think Team Soul Mid, or I think they did a number on Dyrus. They probably killed him twice in a lane swap or something. And with the champions they got, these are the best champions for them individually, so they're probably one off that from a mechanical standpoint as well.
Who actually are the best players in Flash Wolves? What is the team based on? From what I remember, okay, isn't this is the team that has Sword Art as the support player?
Yeah, he's really good.
So I remember he was very good. I remember watching that, but I think you hyped up Stake or something. I think on the last episode we had, that was after they'd won that little IEM, and then Monte in his past episodes was like, Stake is shit, as he often is wont to do. So what's the system within Flash Wolves? Who are the stars? Who are the carries? How does it work?
All right. So the system is that their strength is their mid lane and their jungler. Those two players are probably the best mechanical players at their position, and in the previous season, the reason they were so dominant was they were able to win out that 2v2 skirmish in the mid lane. Almost every time it happened, especially when you gave Carson Nidalee. Even in this season, when he gets Nidalee, he always takes first blood. He's just very, very good on that champion. And that's their main carry position. Their top laner used to be Stake, and he currently still is in the roster, but there's some changes. I'll go through that later. And the way they play Stake is he basically sacrifices all his farm for early tower dives, for the 4-2 tower dive, or the 4-3 tower dive. They try that quite often. And he's just there to draw away jungle attention. He's not really that good of a lane player, and even in team fights, he's kind of shaky. But he's a very important caller person when they play the lane swaps. So he's basically there just to give up farm, give up gold, try to get their team ahead. And he likes to play these champions with a single point stun, so he can do a lot of things in terms of the lane swap. And now we go to their bottom lane. The way they play their bottom lane is that they usually play kind of like a pushing style. If they're playing a lane swap, they don't usually freeze. They usually try to push down your towers first, and then they rotate continuously. And in terms of the strong 2v2 matchup, I don't think they're the best 2v2 lane. If you look at where Karsa ganks, he basically doesn't go bot that often. So their whole focus is on their mid lane, and their other two lanes are for trying to get advantages during the lane swap.
Okay. Let me ask you what sounds like a loaded question, Monte.
Okay, sure.
So here's this is for Monte, okay. So you were at the IEM tournament. Now, in that tournament, if you're Clement, you want to be like, okay, this tournament shows the strength of Flash Wolves, and this is them at their best, and here's the things they did right, and here's the preparation they had, and all that great stuff. But the problem is, when I think of how you describe the other teams in that tournament, I think you pretty much are like, okay, Cloud9 had a terrible tournament, SK got exposed, etc. So aside from the TSM win, to Monty, isn't Flash Wolves doing that well? Kind of a fluke in as much as it's not necessarily that they're bad, it's that other teams kind of were much worse than you'd expect.
I also think that the Tigers gave them those bans in order to help them out. We don't know if they would have been able to come up with those bans if left to their own devices, right? Which is sort of problematic in and of itself. It was also a format issue. The best of one, not really a great format to evaluate these teams. So, some teams in a best of one format will frequently overperform just because that's how the format works, right? So
Clement, that's another question I had to ask you, is that at the time when you were like, you and everyone else was crowing on Twitter, it was almost implied as though it was like a community effort and you were all involved with like preparing for Flash Wolves and giving them info on the other teams. And it was like, I imagine Taiwan as one city, like one little tribe, and you all just got together like, oh, the medicine man Clement requires all the chieftains to bring in their, and you all came in, and for the people of Taiwan you did it. Okay, so were you actually involved in helping their pick ban and stuff like that and helping them scout people? Not
really. They try to ask us like, oh, if you're watching this league, do you know like which champions they play? But we don't really get involved in the actual ban pick phase.
How didn't they know that?
Well, obviously, if you have more people watching different leagues, they can scout it better.
So they didn't know what people in Korea, in NA, in EU play?
They knew, of course, but they wanted like outside.
They want more info.
They wanted more opinions on it, like how good was like certain champions that they play and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and they try to like ask if like, are you guys familiar with this team? Can you give us some tips and hints? Like, we don't actually get into the process. I think that would be like, I think there would be some sort of an ethical breach there.
Yeah,
if casters actually like gave out like, oh, you should do this or you should do that.
Oh,
but I think
I'm sure no Riot caster has ever done anything like that. Wink, wink. Anyway, continue on. Yeah.
But I think it's okay if you just kind of like if they ask you about like certain just like what you know about teams. Like, we don't really study these teams that much. The most we did, like what like at least we were able to do, was like maybe just like type ban pick phases for them and stuff like that. So we should probably show them, Melissa, okay, he played this champion like 7 times, won 5 times on that, something like that. But it's not very like, it's not stuff that they couldn't do themselves, to be honest. Yeah.
See, that's the thing. People were actually concerned when Monty was a coach. Like, well, what if CLG gets to Worlds? Like, wouldn't that be unethical that you're like coaching them as well? But Monty, being a very ethically sound person, had thought that through, and he knew that there was no chance CLG was ever going to get to Worlds. So he was like, no, these two magisteria will never overlap, you know. So there'll be no issues there. So very well done. I commend you, sir. You know, a weaker man might have picked a team that could have made Worlds. So okay, let me ask you that question then. Monty just suggested that essentially Flash Wolves just saw what GE Tigers did to SK and just copied like some of their bans, etc.
Look, I'm not trying to shit on the Flash Wolves here. I do think that Taiwan, since the region has just become itself and it's become much more competitive, and we see people like Korean players and coaches going over, that the scene has improved significantly. So I'm not out there trying to say that Taiwan is terrible, but I don't think they're like that much better than a lot of the top tier LCS teams. I see them more on equal footing these days.
Okay, but anyway, what I was going to ask Clement is, if they did in any way see that game and copy some of it, like if that game didn't happen, if the first game, I mean, technically it was the first game, Flash Wolves played SK first. Do you think they really did just see what GE did and think, right, we could emulate that? Like, what would they have done in a rematch if there was no GE game to give them any pointers, do you think? Just play out the same way the first game did?
I think they got crushed in the first game with the Diana pick right there. Because, well, I think what happened in that tournament was they realized that at the international level, you can't really play the Caitlyn in lane and expect to be very dominant. What happened was that if you do play the Caitlyn, they're just going to punish you super hard with the Corki. And Corki was a very, very strong pick at that point. What they did was, I think in the second game, they realized that, we need to play more protection for NL. They can't let them have like Diana, Hecarim, and they just lose their team fight. And they also made adjustments to their jungle pick as well. I don't think Karsa was that strong of a team fighter at that point, so they gave him some like easier champions like Rek'Sai, a bit more tankier to play with. I think those were the adjustments they made, and of course, I do think they copied the the GT Tigers ban pick phase as well, just banning out Forgiven then.
Does that tournament make you think that Forgiven was overhyped? I mean, he came in as like, this is the god tier ADC, like even among all players, not just Westerners, he's going to be able to compete and maybe even do the best of everyone. Like in this tournament, everyone says like he was exposed or he could only play the 2 champions or he just wasn't as effective. How much of the blame do you think goes on him as a player?
I think he's too meta dependent. I think that would be like a fair assessment. He's really good on the champions he's good with, but if you're only playing 2 champions, that's really dangerous. And if you can't go into the Sivir at that point, I think it's...
Well, he is branching out this season, and he is starting to pick up some wins on different champions. But I think at the same time, if you can waste 2 AD carry bans on a team and no one else, and we've talked about this before, nobody else can pick up the slack on the team. If your mid and top laners can't carry off of a full pool of champions, then there's something wrong with the rest of the team.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's the one I always come back to, Monty, is like, that only works if the rest of the team admit Copenhagen Wolfstar. Like, okay, we admit, like, the AD carry is the only good player and we can let him do what he wants. If your team, like SK, claims, no, wow, a top lane and mid lane are some of the best in Europe, it's like, well, okay, let them have any champion they want in the whole meta. If they can't do it off that, it's like, you have to take some blame as well. So anyway, yeah, I kind of agree with that. So let's go forwards from this then. Clement, what happened in the time between IEM and MSI that meant that meant Flash Wolves went from the best team in Taiwan to suddenly AHQ was the team that represents Taiwan at MSI? What happened in the meantime?
Yeah, and can we talk about like AHQ's like pretty miraculous run through the playoffs too? Because this is actually a very interesting story that I don't think a lot of people know.
Yeah, so I think I'll start off from like the Flash Wolves and how the meta generally changed. What happened between IEM and our LMS playoffs was the Cinderhulk meta evolved. So you now have teams that are very scrappy, have a lot of tanky front lines, and are very aggressive that are coming out. And if you look at the draft phase for like AHQ, what really happened there was, first of all, they swapped their players. Their jungler used to be Albus. He moved to the support position, and they put Mountain in. Mountain has always been a super aggressive jungler. He didn't do that well previously in his career. He would actually get caught out a lot of times in the jungle alone and just died for no reason. And so they made those 2 big swaps. Green Tea moved out of the roster from the supporting role, and he changed to more of a analyst position. And that really changed the dynamic of AHQ then. So what AHQ used to do was that they were a very scrappy team, and they would scrap without their AD carry. But once Mountain came into the lineup and Albus was in the lane with Anne, the dynamic changed, and they focused a lot of their attention on the bot lane, and they would try to snowball from bot, and they would try to enhance Mountain's aggressive jungle style into the red side jungle of the enemy opponent. And because of the Cinderhulk meta, when you have these really aggressive jungler and scrapping with your the enemy jungler, oftentimes what happens is that jungler can stay alive for a very, very long time until the lanes are winning can come and help. So that was a huge change in their dynamic and their system. And what happened to, I think, Flash Wolves and what they're falling off now and what they're continuing to have issues with was that the mid meta really stopped to matter as much. If you think about the spring season and the nerfs that happened to the assassins, they're actually pretty huge. They're very substantial. You saw Fizz got nerfed. You saw Kassadin be completely taken out of the meta for a while. You saw Zed had his base stats nerfed as well. You saw the dueling jungles from Karsa's end. You saw Nidalee get hit super hard. She wasn't relevant in the Cinderhulk meta. Lee Sin just falling off, and also Rengar, which was Karsa's best champion, also just disappeared in the meta as well. So Flash Wolves took a huge hit to how they used to play. Their only winning lane and their focus in most games was on the mid and the jungler. And in that meta, that got taken away from them.
Well, I also look at the
Wait a
Flash
second,
Wolves.
move to your left a bit again, Clement.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I also look at the Flash Wolves, and I look at a player like Maple, like you're saying, that is pretty dependent on that meta. But then I also look at a player, because we talk about the Flash Wolves, and we'll get into this because like MMD, I've been watching more Taiwan recently, and MMD is on the team now, so they're trying to deal with Stake, who is legitimately a pretty bad player. NL also. If we look at I really like Sword Art as a support player. I think he's very good. He is currently like rank 30 on Korean solo queue as well. He plays a lot and does very well on the Korean server. But NL, man, his positioning at times is just terrible.
Yeah, that's been a problem for their team. And NL is also kind of limited in his champion pool on what he plays. So I think they're trying to experience more. They're bringing in a new Korean AD carry called Kramer. I
have no idea who the guy is. So.
Yeah, I don't know who he is, but high-ranking solo queue player. NL is still going to remain on the lineup, but they were going to do some experimenting with them. And if you look at what happened to Flash Wolves from spring to summer, was that top lane started to matter a lot more. If you look at just the damage contribution between spring and summer, the biggest difference happens in the top lane. Top laners now do a lot more damage. They need to output damage. And the problem they had with Stake was that you just couldn't get damage output from him. He could give you a stun, he could give you a lane swap, but he wasn't going to provide that team fight output. And that really hurt them. So if you look at AHQ versus Flash Wolves, the problem they had now was that their top lane was not winning. Ziv has proven himself as a very, very strong player, and their bot lane was getting pummeled by Anne now with Albus. And their mid lane, even though that Maple could get that CS advantage in lane, it didn't really matter that much. Most of the team fights that were happening, a lot of times they would start without the mid laner there. There would be 4v4s with the top laner coming down. And in that situation, you don't really see Flash Wolves as being comparable to AHQ. So I think they fell off a lot of... They just didn't have as many strong points as HQ had.
Okay, so explain this then.
Okay.
When you described part of the problem for Flash Wolves was like the mid lane meta getting nerfed, assassins especially. Shouldn't this weaken Westdoor? How was he getting better? If they're exactly his champions you're talking about.
This is the thing. I think a lot of players don't really understand this, but Westdoor hasn't really been the focal point for AHQ for a while. If you look at his record from spring to now, he doesn't really win lane. It's not really about how well he does in lane. He's perfectly fine with taking a loss in lane. The most important thing they want to focus on is bot lane and then dragon control. So as long as he's not like completely out of the game and he can still threaten your backline in team fights, HQ's perfectly fine with that. He's never been the focal point for AHQ.
Then how do you define him as a player? Because here's the problem. After Worlds, there was all this hype that like, oh, he's such a great player. Like, I even saw a LoL eSports article, Clement, that said, one of the quotes in it was, if he played in like LCS, he would be a superstar. Not even just like a good player, like a superstar mid laner, you know. Whereas I remember on the episode we had you on before, you actually kind of like debunked some of that. You kind of like made it like, well, he's like good at times, but at the moment, remember at that particular time before IEM, like you were like, actually he's kind of dropped off a lot, and he's not even doing the best in his own region right now, and all his has he had like a resurgence? Is that why at MSI again people are like hailing him as a superstar? And wow, look at these crazy Fizz games.
I think he isn't expected to carry as much now that you have Ziv and Anne stepping up to the plate. I think that's a huge boon for him. I should rephrase what I previously said. Like it wasn't that he was never the focal point, but was that when AHQ was doing successful, it wasn't because he was snowballing from mid lane. That wasn't how they won the game. So what actually happened during the playoffs was that a lot of champions that he used to play came back into the meta. His Season 2 champions like Twisted Fate, like Cho'Gath, and he even played Karthus. These were his Season 2 champion pools. They were relevant again. So in a sense, the champion pool issue that happened with Westdoor still exists, but depending on the meta, now he has more picks to go with.
Okay, but at MSI he used Fizz, and at the time, the only people using Fizz mid lane at that time was like Pawn to style on people, like, haha, I can even pick Fizz and I win. Like, he did pretty well with it, right? He was pretty good for a non-meta champ.
I want to say like Fizz that's his best champion. He's pretty much the embodiment of Fizz himself. So when we cast and we see a Fizz pick, we say, oh, they're picking Westdoor. Like, there's certain champions where certain players are so familiar on them, they're just so good with them. They've been playing them for 3 years, their best champion, most played champion, that they can sort of like transcend any situation. And if you look at even this season, it's been the case in regular season. When he picks Fizz, they always win. Well, that's kind of like they have a completely winning record right now, but he has a lot of kills on Fizz. He's actually lane dominant in some points when he plays that champion. So I think for him, Fizz is really an outlier. You just can't give him that champion, to be honest. It's kind of like Dade on Yasuo when he was on his prime.
Okay. So Monty, what did you actually think of AHQ at that tournament? Because going into it, obviously no one really thought about AHQ, because at the time everyone was like, well, there's the Chinese and the Koreans, that was the real debate, like who's the best there. Then it was like, okay, TSM should be better than Fnatic. But then after that, it was like Fnatic, AHQ, no one really knows who's going to get that fourth spot. What did you think going into
That's exactly how I felt. I felt it from preparing and from watching AHQ's games and their playoff run, where they had this miracle run through their playoffs, that I had assumed, because remember, people always like to shit on everyone of not picking Fnatic. I mean, I can just tell you from...
Wait there a second.
Nobody...
Your voice just died for a second.
Yeah.
Right,
literally nobody thought, who was a caster at that event, who was anything at all.
Rewind a second. Who did they shit on? That's the part we missed.
No. Fnatic. Like, nobody thought Fnatic was...
Everyone was shitting on Fnatic, true.
Right, because...
They were going to crash and burn, I believe, was the term used. Yeah.
Well, it was just like in our conversations, because if you watched the European playoffs and you watched that season and you're an analyst, you were not seeing things that really made you very confident in the team at all. I mean, you were seeing them picking top lane Smite Lee Sin and barely scraping by against these teams, and like the Unicorns of Love final, which was a giant mess strategically, and it was worrying. Obviously, I think Fnatic has really come together since that point now, and we're seeing much bit different kind of gameplay, and not so much of a bizarre pick and ban phase that they were exhibiting previously. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I thought that AHQ and Fnatic would be fighting for that fourth spot in the bracket stage.
Going into the tournament, what realistically were your expectations for AHQ, Clement? Like, were you actually hyped because of their run in the playoffs? Like, well, they can really do a lot of damage here. They're going to do so well.
I thought they would be placed fourth overall in terms of strength. It would be above Fnatic. I didn't really think very highly of Fnatic at that point as well. And
no one in the whole fucking world did, dude. No one did.
Yeah.
How could you have thought well of them?
Yeah, so unlike when I went on Primetime League, people thought Fnatic had a higher chance than AHQ, and I was like, no, that's totally wrong. I thought AHQ would beat out Fnatic pretty handily, and BJK would not be an issue. So probably fourth.
Okay, so we never actually got to find out, though. What would have happened if they'd have played in a Best of X series? Who would have actually won out of Fnatic and AHQ, do you think?
I actually think AHQ would have won out.
Why?
At that tournament, then, if you remember the games, they picked on Steelback super hard. And I think Fnatic's playstyle is very vulnerable to that. They didn't have a very strong bot lane in that time, and what AHQ likes to do is dive your bot lane a lot, and they always focus their bot lane in first round in like the first jungle clear. So, and I don't think Huni would have had such a great matchup against Ziv. I think Ziv is a very, very solid player.
Because that's actually one of the matchups that people forget. Because now people will look back in reverse and go, oh, well, Fnatic did great there. They came so close to beating SKT. People forget what I brought up in the time at the post-SI show, which was what made hilarious to me that AHQ beat TSM was that, first of all, if you remember the order, it went like this, Clement. Fnatic beat TSM. So then every EU fanboy was like, haha, suck a dick, NA. But then the best part was, then AHQ beat Fnatic. So then NA was like, yeah, it turned out it was just a fluke. And then, of course, AHQ beat TSM. And I was like, it was glorious. It's like because they thought that they'd got a chance to talk shit and then it all just turned back on. So anyway, when they actually beat Fnatic in that game in the group, was that just what you expected to happen? Was that in line with what you're saying now about the style that they would play against Fnatic?
Pretty much. Like HQ did not change their play style when they were facing up against Fnatic. They did what they always did, and it was very successful against Steelback. So I was not terribly surprised that they beat Fnatic. That was within our estimations. Yeah.
Did Fnatic losing to a HQ make you think, Monty, that like, all right, maybe the win over TSM was just like a weird one. Maybe Fnatic's still not as good as well. They're still not good.
No, I think that Fnatic came into that tournament much stronger than anyone else had thought, and that the first win that you're talking about, I think, was very surprising just in general. But also they looked better doing it than they had previously.
So what do you make overall then of Westdoor in that tournament, Clement? Because in the group stage, yeah, like I said, he was doing great on certain champions. Not so great when he got off the Zed in Fizz, if we're being honest here. But okay, well, if anyone thinks now he's like some Moscow 5 era god of like non-meta champions, yeah, he's really good on Fizz and Zed. Once you got him to like the Karthus sort of thing, it was like, yeah, that's not working out so well anymore though. So what was his overall tournament like? Because you have to remember, Clement, unfortunately for you, the one series no one remembers because no one gives a fuck is when EDG just shit stomped AHQ 3-0. Because at that point, that's where the story ended. Like everyone was watching SKT Fnatic, then they remember the final, and then they don't remember what happened in that other semi-final. That just never existed. So tell me, what happened?
They got out-dueled a lot, out-skirmished early. EDG is one of AHQ's closest scrim partners.
Okay.
And they're very familiar with what AHQ does. They're very familiar with Mountain is going to do. So if you look at Clear Love in those series, he placed a lot of wards on their bottom lane. And he knew when Mountain was going to come and try to get their snowball for and rolling. He was there a lot of the times. So nobody really thought that AHQ could take a game out of EDG from the Taiwanese side. It was going to be a very long shot. We were not surprised about the 3-0 thing. AHQ's very successful because not only do they have like a very good, a very standard play style, like they're always going to snowball bot, but they have the mechanics to make it work. So a lot of the times, even if you know what they're going to do, you can't outplay them just 4-on-4. It's not going to happen. Like Ann is he used to be a top 10 Korean solo queue player as well. Very good mechanics. Ziv is very dominant when he comes down from the teleport. Mountain is also very strong mechanically. So even if you know what they're going to do, they're going to do that 4v4. You can't prevent it a lot of the times. The difference about EDG is that they actually have the players that can outplay HQ. So when they know what you're going to do and they have better players and you start scrapping with them all the time, the conclusion was pretty foregone. Yeah.
Okay. How did Westdoor do in that series?
Westdoor, I think he did like about as good as he could. He wasn't spectacular. We knew he would have some moments. Like they did win some skirmishes. I think that was that proved to at least the Taiwanese fan base, at least, that AHQ was able to scrap on a mechanical level with the best teams in the world. But in the end, I think EDG just they didn't even need to read AHQ so much. So they knew their playbook. They scrim all the time. Like maybe AHQ's like they even have sessions where they go to China and stuff like that. So
Is Westdoor the best player in LMS?
I wouldn't even. I think Maple's still better mid.
Okay.
He's much more lane dominant mid. He has a much larger champion pool. Like Westdoor is probably never going to pick up champions like Azir and Cassiopeia. Those were huge problems in terms of AHQ's drafting phase. I'm saying this, I think it's pretty obvious. Like I don't even feel like I'm like spoiling anything from AHQ. If you look at their ban pick phase, they always ban Azir because that champion just you can't brawl with Azir if he wants to disengage. So in terms of what he provides to the team, I think Maple's still probably a more important player.
Obviously, you don't watch some of the LCS regions much. From what you saw of Febiven, MSI, and obviously you already know Bjergsen from the past anyway in other tournaments, how does Westdoor compare to these players, though? Because obviously these are, in theory, star players, you know, so what do you think?
I think you need to look at it in two scenarios. One is if he gets Fizz, then he'll probably still solo queue Febiven sometimes. Like, he's just very, very good on that champion. But against Bjergsen and I don't really see him coming out of lane too well. He's probably going to get just pushed to turret a lot.
Okay, on our last show, you actually gave this interesting system breakdown of TSM and how they played their best when they actually played focused around the bot lane and they didn't necessarily have Bjergsen on these assassins, which, if you look at the stats, was pretty accurate, right? What did you think about this tournament? Because in this tournament, they literally went that style. Like, they were like, Bjergsen, you are playing utility mids only, and you will never be like the main damage output or whatever. Like,
what I actually wanted to say about in the first time I came on Summoning Insight was I thought their system didn't make a whole lot of sense at certain points. So what I meant by that was they had their best player mid on a kind of supportive type of mid laner. And they had Wild Turtle, who's not very strong in lane, as their main carry, bot lane, playing Tristana a lot of the times. And that system had a lot of, like, just logically, it doesn't sound very strong to me, because what happens if you lose lane bot lane, its system's not really going to work that well, and you have your best player on kind of a supportive champion. So what I thought they would be stronger was that what I thought they needed to improve in their previous system was they needed to balance how much attention the mid lane got. And if they try to play Bjergsen on like an assassin player, they could put jungle resource into him. But what happened when they were playing that style was that they were putting too much jungle resources into Bjergsen. And what happened was that the other lanes were just falling completely behind. And what I wanted to say about their previous system was that I didn't think they really had a very good balance. It sort of felt like they had their current system of like just having that late game carry on Wild Turtle to cover up weaknesses. Okay. So yeah, I didn't think that was the optimal system from them. I'm not saying that I can like instantly come up with a better solution for them, but it just doesn't. It sounds like a system where you're trying to cover weaknesses rather than accentuate your strengths.
Well, no, the genius of what they did at MSI was they still had a system where they had Bjergsen on the utility mid, but this time they put all the jungle pressure onto him as well. So in many ways, worst of both worlds. So that was quite an impressive system of Scotland. What did you think, Monte, on this sense? Because I remember Clement actually did quite a good job of breaking down like how he saw TSM in that sense. What do you think of the issues they had at MSI and since?
I think that we, like, the whole issue, we really broke that down, I think, quite a bit in terms of TSM in previous shows and what happened at MSI and what those issues were. I think it's interesting to talk about their issues since then. And I do want to kind of tie this into something else. So Clement mentioned earlier that one of the reasons why we saw the decline, or we are seeing the decline of the Flash Wolves and the rise of AHQ in this season was part of it started with the Cinderhulk in the playoffs. And now he mentioned that we're in a very top lane focused meta. And I want to talk about that for a minute, because a lot of the rise of the top lane and why top laners are doing so much damage these days, as Clement mentioned earlier, is that with Cinderhulk, we came into a position where junglers could be primary tanks of a team. And then if you couple that with the fact that a lot of these melee tank supports are starting to get big. Champions like Alistair being such a high priority on the list. Some teams play Braum still. We have Thresh who can get tanky. Basically, the front line can be created in the jungle or in the support position. Now, you don't have to do that. You can play Lee Sin and Italy still. There's a great diversity. But that has opened up a lot of carry top lane picks that weren't previously available because you just couldn't play them without having a front line. So the problem for TSM now, and I think one of the reasons, there are several reasons that we can touch on that TSM is struggling. Obviously, Wild Turtle is playing terribly this season. And there's the issue, but the other issue is one of Dyrus. And Dyrus has improved as a top laner, but I think that unless the meta changes drastically before Worlds, and Riot tends to slow down patches and meta changes pre-Worlds because they want teams to be comfortable going into that era, is that it is so important to have a top laner that can carry right now. Not just a top laner who can get by, who can tank, but who has a flexibility that he can rock your socks with Rumble or with a champion like Riven or Ryze, these high damage Echo, these high damage carries, and can also dial it back and play the tanks. What are your thoughts, Clement?
Yeah, exactly. I think a huge reason, if you looked at MSI, the top 4 teams all had very good top laners, and they had this flexibility to carry. I think Ziv, particularly, he learned a lot from MSI, and when he came back into Taiwan, what he did was he now plays a lot more champions, and that's a huge focal point for AHQ right now, is that not only can they win from the bot lane, if you leave the top lane alone, Ziv is going to start to carry the game by himself. And if
I saw that last week when AHQ and the Flash Wolves played each other, Ziv just hard carried a game on Ryze, just straight up.
Yeah. And if you look at that ban pick phase, you can see why Flash Wolves is starting to fall behind, because they had to ban out a lot of ANS champions. They didn't want AHQ to roll from the bot lane, but in doing that, they gave Ryze to Ziv, who can now play a lot of these AP champions as well. And for instance, he now plays Rumble too. And I just think in terms of this meta right now, if you look at the top teams in the LMS, what they're trying to do is they're trying to, a huge reason MSE, Midnight Sun, is rising is also because they have a player, a Hong Kong player called Lofts, who also plays a lot of these top lane champions. He can play the Maokai, had like a 70 KDA this week. He can play a lot of Rumble champion, Rumble, Ryze, and Hecarim as well.
As it stands right now, is it like a given that AHQ should be the team that wins this LMS?
Yes, I'd say so. They currently are undefeated. We moved to a BO2 system this split, and they have currently won 7 BO2s without any losses. And even they said themselves that, coming to play in the LMS now kind of feels like a vacation. They can start trying different builds, and they're trying to widen Westdoor's champion pool. They're having him play Ahri right now. So I think they're in the testing phase. The real trials for them is trying to scrim teams from LPL.
Okay. Is it overhyped, this factor that being able to practice Korean teams helped the teams in this region improve? Like, was there a period in time where these Taiwanese or GPL teams just never got to play Koreans?
Most of the Korean teams still don't scrim LMS teams. Yeah. The LPL teams were because, I guess the language barrier helps. There's more personal connections there. There's also analysts coming between teams. For instance, like Logitech Snipers analysts went to play in the LSPL, went to Overton LSPL team as an analyst.
Okay.
So there's playing in East Asia alongside like giants like Korea and China. It's a gift, and it's also kind of a curse at the same time. The problem is, yes, you get to scrim them, but there's also this huge suction force that tries to take your best talent and take your analysts from you, especially from the LPL scene. I'm not sure if LCK will ever have a Taiwanese player I knew that they actually contacted players that were very high ranking on the Korean ladder, but no further moves were made when they actually found out they were from Taiwanese and not actually Koreans. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you this then, because you hinted at this last time.
Yeah.
So I asked you in the past, why did Toyz, why did these Westdoor, why did these players not just get signed to LPL teams in the past? And you made the point that behind the scenes, offers were made, or people just didn't want to go for whatever political reasons, or they didn't want to leave for whatever reason. Has IEM, MSI, do you think has this reignited this at all? Do you think people, we're all LPL teams, hey, we should just get this Westdoor guy into our team or something?
Okay. When things have changed a little bit. I actually think players do want to go.
Okay.
They've seen last season how much money the Chinese teams actually had.
Yeah.
It wasn't that way before. So back then when Chinese players were getting not so good salaries, they didn't really see the point in joining. But now that there's these mega salaries being dumped in the Chinese teams, I do think a lot of players actually are swayed a little bit. The problem is whether they can get out of their organizations. And I think the recent rule change, the format to Worlds, where LMS actually gets 2 spots now, that would be kind of a big factor for the top 2 Taiwanese teams for their players to stay in Taiwan.
What do you think of that, Monty? The LMS gets 2 slots of its own.
I actually think it's perfectly fair, honestly. I mean, if we just look at the history of that region, it was very rare for a non-Taiwanese team to actually make it out and put up any kind of fight, really, at an international event. So I think Taiwan has proved itself, especially this year.
Is 2 slots the right amount?
Yeah, I think 2 is the right amount. I think everybody that I've talked to from Taiwan, and Clement would agree with me, that any more than 2 is a little bit overkill at this point, just considering the talent of the region.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you put up to 3, it's pretty iffy. I was actually very surprised that we got a 2nd slot from Riot. I thought it was because of marketing reasons, because obviously Southeast Asia has a much better market than Taiwan does.
So, okay, does that mean, Clement, that now that GPL is this separate thing with shitters from Vietnam and stuff playing in it, does that mean that when you look at GPL now, you also have joined us in the rest of the world as well, who cares about GPL? Because now, your good teams have gotten out of it, they're in LMS. Surely no one cares about GPL now.
Well, I think that's fairly accurate, to be honest. Our teams, LMS teams, don't really scrim GPL teams anymore.
See what I mean? Monty, this is the beautiful thing about League of Legends. Everyone in that past conversation was pulling for the LMS teams. That's so unfair. Why don't the best Korean teams practice against them, help them get better? And then I'm like, so what do you do with GPL teams? Oh, fuck those guys. Those guys are shit. We're not playing them. Come on. How is anyone supposed to get better? You're not even scrimming your own people that used to be in your league. Okay. It's BM.
Oh, I know.
When you get out the ghetto, Clement, you're supposed to reach your hand down and lift someone else up. So
yeah, but I think GPL was a huge reason that the Taiwanese scene wasn't able to continue after season 2. The GPL format really choked out Taiwanese talent very hard because it did not provide any method for the Taiwanese teams to actually have a professional stage. The GPL back then was not it was an invitational. If you wanted to play professional League of Legends, there was no road to actually go there. So I don't know, you just look at the format and it's kind of a sigh of relief that Taiwan is out of that stage.
Is there a secret team in GPL that might one day turn out to be good that we just don't know about yet?
Well, you're going to have to ask someone else than me.
Okay, that's all we need to know, right? Cut it off. Okay, so basically for Clement, it's they've literally erected the wall between Taiwan and GPL, and the GPL are the wildlings out there. You're going to have to leave you guys to die. No one's helping you guys. Don't come over this side of the wall, okay?
If you put it that way, it sounds really harsh. I mean, one day, I think Vietnam is a place to really look out for.
Yeah, especially in wars, America.
Now, they have 6 teams in the GPL, from what I understand,
Okay.
and
Let's roll the
for
dice.
for Garena, it's a place they really want to focus on, just to start their booming in esports industry.
So after MSI and knowing what you know about LMS now, Clement, how good actually are AHQ? Like, if we did a world rankings, are you really expecting that like next Worlds they should be like a playoff team?
Yeah, I do think next Worlds they are a playoff team. The problem is that I don't really see them getting over top Chinese teams or top Korean teams. That's the difficulty I see.
Okay,
If they
so
face-
I will just point this out. Like, Clement doesn't really, as I said, Clement doesn't really watch LCS, so it's not like we don't want to Froscore in him. He's not going to say something interesting like, well, they can't play this. No one in the West knows how to play Rise or something. He's not going to say some shit like that. But it sounds like you're pretty confident that if they play again, it will be similar to MSI sort of results if they play the Western teams.
I think, okay, this is based on my knowledge of them scrimming against the Chinese teams.
Okay.
And what they rank themselves as a good Chinese team, like at least a top half Chinese team. So I'm just kind of like based off relative comparisons. If you're slightly closer to EDG, I think you should be doing okay in the West. I haven't watched that much of EU. I have a really busy schedule now that like casting at Arena takes on a lot of like other responsibilities in production and stuff.
Okay. It's
but-
okay, Clement. It's okay. Listen, much
Yeah.
like you with the GPL versus you versus the Koreans, you're now allowed to be on the other side of that equation. You know, after AHQ beat Fnatic, and then after you saw NA wasn't even relevant, you know, now you're allowed to be like, listen, I don't have time to watch those little leagues. Like, if I've got more time, I'm going to spend more time watching LPL or something. You know, it's okay, Clement. You can
Yeah.
join us in this
Please,
ivory tower
please say
now
that.
on this show.
I watched the game of the week from NA and I wasn't terribly impressed by them. So
Yeah, that term is now a lie and false advertising in America. There's no such thing as the game of the week. There's just the disappointment of the week.
So I think just based off the games I watch in NA, I think AHQ would do very well. Yeah.
Okay, Monty, before we end the Clement segment, let me ask you this. If you had to describe for Clement what he's missed in NA LCS, so he's probably thinking, well, you know, I'm sure TSM picked it up after MSI, and, you know, Cloud9, they changed the player, I heard. How would you give him, like, a basic synopsis of where NA LCS is right now?
I don't even know where to begin with.
I just want to see how you'd explain it to someone who doesn't, in theory, doesn't know anything. He's going in fresh here, Monty. So start at the top. What happened to TSM? Do you think?
It's like watching a Michael Bay Transformers movie where there are a lot of explosions, and as long as you turn your brain off, you will not be extraordinarily disappointed in the lack of cohesion or depth.
Any
I
hope?
heard Dignitas was a good team.
Any hope, Monty? Dignitas
Well,
is winning
you
a
know
lot of
what?
games. You know.
Good is a term that is used to describe Dignitas. Good compared to the rest of their region. I think they're okay, especially now that they got Helios. Good as a team compared to other teams on a world scale. Not sure I would really put them up there, as it were. It's a
So
little-
who's the top 3 teams in NA right now?
Oh boy.
It's like-
Oh boy.
CLG,
Okay.
Dignitas,
Dignitas. Okay.
and TSM.
All right.
This is like
You don't even know
Clement
the
reacts
standings.
to NALCS. This is great.
So, Clement, how do you feel without any knowledge of watching Dignitas, knowing what you know, that the only roster change that they made was a Zingy for Helios? How does that make you feel?
Oh my God.
Confused? Alarmed?
No, the only real memory I have of Zingy was his like streaming days when Odd One would play him, and it would be like General Odd One against like the
Yeah, it was pretty much like that in the LCS too. Versus Admiral Zingy, yeah, it was pretty
Yeah.
much exactly like that.
and Zingy would play like what was that AP Amumu and Fiddlesticks and Karthus Jungle and be like,
Well, technically, he tried to play an AP Vi in LCS, but you remember that? That was a good game, right? Accidentally, of course. But who can tell with a Zingy? So anyway, do you have any more topics about Taiwan before we leave this section, Monty? Is there anything else burning in your mind? Let me ask you something, Monty. If AHQ joined LCK, the Premier League in Korea, where do you think, Monty, where would AHQ be in LCK?
Well, I think in Korea right now we have SK Telecom, and then we have like the Ku Tigers, and then it's really, really unclear as to who is actually good below that, because we haven't. This week is going to tell us like things like how good is Jin Air, because we haven't really gotten a good answer to that question yet. So I think they'd be competitive between the like 4th and 6th range.
Okay. Do you watch much LCK, Clement?
Yeah, I do catch like the SKT games when I can.
Okay. What do you think of SKT this season then, in the post MSI world?
They looked really strong again. I mean, they look crisp. I think Marin has tuned back a little. At MSI, I think sometimes Marin played really reckless, and he got punished for that. They look better like that right now, and I think Faker, he can actually play a really good Victor, which is surprising for us in the LMS. Like Victor went on an 11-game losing streak in the LMS, so like,
he's the only good Victor player that exists. I mean, to the degree that Faker can ridiculously hard carry games with that champion, he is really by a long shot.
You know, all the TSM fans are like banging on the screen right now, Monty.
I don't care.
Like I was really surprised at that. I looked at his game with Victor, and he was actually very lane dominant, and that's just not the case in LMS. So yeah, that was a really surprising thing for me. Like,
Faker is currently having an insanely good season, and that's the thing about Korea, is that Faker was good last season, but he wasn't the same like level of fakerness that we normally saw. This season, he has been insanely good so far.
Clement, at MSI, was Faker the best player in the tournament? Please move to your left as you answer.
Oh, sorry. I'm not sure. I think he played pretty. I wouldn't say so. I think he played really like kind of unrespectable against Febiven. And if you get solo killed twice by Fnatic's mid laner, I don't think you get qualified for like the best player. And he made some really questionable plays. I remember the play top lane when they tried to kill like Huni with Ari, and I was like, I think it was under a lot of pressure at MSI. Bengi didn't really show up. Their bottom lane was actually getting beaten up quite bad. So maybe I think it's just like the move back to Korea and like other players stepping up a little bit, not under that much pressure from like world level competition. Maybe it's freeing him up to do better in mid lane.
As an analyst, what did you think of EDG's whole like trap for Faker's LeBlanc in that last game in the pick ban? Because supposedly, here's a little bit of info for everyone, by the way. I heard from a little bird who was listening to the comms of that match that supposedly the SKT players or the org or whatever was saying like don't pick LeBlanc, and Faker just like locked it in anyway. That's what I heard. So, what do you think? Just as an analyst, was this like some brilliant Uber chess move, like that they really knew what he'd do and then they had it all planned for him? Was it just impromptu? Do you think? How much genius do you really assign to that? Do you think?
I think it must have been premeditated. Like, just the level that they went to in that draft to shut him down was. I don't think you can. That's not an on the fly move to me. I don't think.
I just think they had it planned all along. Probably knew that Faker was under a lot of pressure, and if he wanted to carry, he would go for his best champion.
So was it? Here's the thing. So looking at it from Faker's side, then we know now that he lost the game, and actually from how well he played, there's almost nothing he could have done in the game. It turns out, but at the time of the pick ban, was it like a mistake from him knowing the information that he had? Was it hubris to pick it, Monty?
I don't think it was hubris. I think that if he was the one who was confident on that champion, then absolutely He should have picked that, and that's what we know from the comms that have been released. Is that Clement was telling him to go for it if that's what he was confident in, and he wanted him to play something that he would have confidence in that fifth and final game.
Okay.
So, I mean, that makes sense to me, and I think that they just had a plan for it.
What do you think, Clement? Was it the right pick? I mean, it was his undefeated champ. He was like the god of that champ. Could you have seen a way it could have worked?
I think Faker was frustrated that during MSI. I don't think the other positions were really playing up to par on the world stage. So I think he felt a very, very strong urge to carry that game himself. And that's probably he went for that champion.
See,
I don't blame him for the choice.
What Faker should have done to kind of dismiss all that and make it so that the blame was deflected off him and he no longer was kind of like ridiculed for that LeBlanc pick is he should have just released a Facebook post, Monty, where he said, it was just an anti-LeBlanc comp, lol. I was donezo once they locked all that in, you know, like that would have been the move right there. A page from the CLG playbook. So, anyway, okay, so I think that's pretty much the end of the Clement segment, right? Is there any final words you have for the world, Clement?
If any of you guys want to check out stuff from the LMS, we do have a weekly column that's written in English. That's called LMS Spotlight. I write it every week, so if you want to get a closer look, we provide a lot of stats as well.
Okay, wait, before you go, here's what you have to do. You have to sell LMS to me. I'm just some ignorant Western fanboy. All I know about that region, okay, is like Westdoor, oh my god, and his fears and Zed. Like, sell me something else about LMS. Which other teams are cool in it? What's the cool matchups outside of just AHQ?
All right, so for LMS, the top 3 teams right now, AHQ, Flash Wolves, and also Midnight Sun, which is it's becoming a rising force. They have 2 extra Korean players, and they're like a triple threat team with Lofts, and it's a very good top laner. I would say if you're wanting to, the reasons why you would want to watch the LMS is, number 1, we play a fast-paced game. It's not like Korea where the CKPM is kind of low. We're more clear toward like a Chinese style play style where things happen a lot faster, and the level of the player quality is actually really high as well. Most of the players here, they have to have organizations want them to get masters in the Korean Challenger ladder. And we have players that have 1,000 LP points in Challenger top 10 KR teams. So there's a lot of good mechanical depth in it, and it's also a faster paced game. Entertaining.
Who is the best player outside of AHQ? Oh, I guess you said Maple already.
Yeah,
okay, AHQ and Flash Wolves. Who else is good aside from those 2 teams? Give me like a couple of the stars.
Sword Art as a support.
Outside of those 2 teams, who are the stars?
So for Midnight Sun, Lost is their star player. Assassin Snipers, we have I think Achi is very good. He carried when he was in his first week. He's
the mid laner, right?
Yeah, he's a mid laner. 50% of their team's damage came from him. Very solid player. They play like this. They play poke champions pretty much. They have BeBe on.
Oh, that reminds me, I've got 2
Ash.
questions for you, Clement.
Yeah.
One, how is BeBe doing? Because he plays in Snipers still. I'll just remind you, by the way, Monty ranked BeBe above Wild Turtle in his rankings of the AD carries at Worlds for Group B. I'll just put that out there, you know. So
I'm not sure of Wild Turtle's recent performance. I heard he was declining or something. So
He's been really bad recently.
Okay. BeBe is
the mighty BeBe. Is he any good?
He's not a lane dominant player. He plays for the team most of the time.
Okay.
He's very good on Ashe. Ashe is like his best champion so far, but he basically plays utility AD carry and leaves most of the damage to the mid lane or the top lane. So
here's the other question I would have been remiss not to ask you, Clement.
Okay.
We've now had 1.5 seasons of the return of Toyz, the savior, the god of the region. Oh my lord, he was so good on Oriana. What's he actually been like in his return? Seems like he has some games where he still goes ham, somewhere it looked to me like he's a reverse Westdoor. Like he's only good on the control mages, and then he gets shit on when he plays everything else.
He's actually very good on Azir. I think that's probably one of his best champions right now. In the meta, he kind of lost a couple of champions. He used to play a lot of Lissandra, but that's no longer viable. The problem with HKE, from my perspective, is that they had kind of a lot of supporting staff issues. They fired their Korean coach right before they went into playoffs. So I'm not really sure what happened there, but it seemed like the Korean coach wasn't doing much for them.
Okay.
So they had supporting staff turmoil over there. Stanley's performance is really on and off. He's not very consistent at all. This season, they brought in a new Korean AD carry called Raisin. He's Ole's old friend of something. And they also brought in 3 new supporting staff. And that really showed. Last week, they started to shoot up of the rankings. Anyway, what I want to say about HK is that whether they succeed or fail, it usually doesn't have much to do with Toyz. Toyz has always been above average and pretty decent at these control mages, but the big difference is, can they get a good ban pick phase? Can they get a strategy rolling? And previous times when they had issues with their coach, they didn't have that, and now they do. They're actually shooting up the rankings pretty fast.
Will he ever be like comparable to his old level?
I don't think so. I think, honestly speaking, the mechanical level from Season 2 to now has grown so much that you pretty much have to reassess every player that you considered good back then.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I think that's the end of the LMS segment. So, thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you for having me. Goodbye.
Right, we'll start off in NA now to do the Western scene, etc. Now, we started out when we were talking before there. I'm glad we didn't go into it too much, but obviously there's been the recent roster move issue, which is that apparently Keith McBreath, Le Toucan, as he is referred to as, has been brought into TSM initially on a sub basis. And the suggestion was, I mean, by the fact that they haven't outright cut Wild Turtle, the suggestion initially is maybe this is essentially to play the same kind of carrot and stick trick that they played with Piglet in Liquid, where by bringing in this player and him doing, well, for a start off, since he's more of a supportive style of player, playing into the team concept more, you kind of motivate the other guy that, like, listen, if you want to be the carry player, you want to be a main player in this team, you have to improve your levels drastically. Do you kind of see it as that kind of scenario? Do you think it's possible they might actually just be phasing Wild Turtle out and Keith McBreath is the new AD carry of team at TSM?
I honestly think that's probably the best idea for TSM. I mean, look, since the Season 3 World Championship, I have never been really that big of a believer in Wild Turtle in terms of his skill. I think he was good during that particular run at that particular time, but ever since that point, he has just not been very impressive, in my opinion.
He's won 2 LCS titles and an IEM as a secondary carry.
But it's that he's not consistent enough in his positioning and in his laning phase to really go toe-to-toe against world-class bottom lanes, and I think that is really a problem. I mean, even if we look at TSM on some of their best wins, like the one at IEM, he can't deliver week in and week out the same kind of performance that a player like Sneaky can, for example. And I think that's really a very large issue that the team is starting to address, and realizing that there are a lot of other options, especially in AD carries. I mean, honestly, like, there are a lot of other options even in NA. There are a lot of statistics that have been coming out recently, like so far this season, Wild Turtle is second lowest, I think, to every carry in terms of damage per minute to champions in the LCS. Out of both NA and EU, I believe. And then the only person who's below him is Maple Street, who is no longer part of Team 8. So, I mean, that says, I think that speaks to a pretty significant problem within the TSM roster, and something that they are wisely attempting to address right now.
Okay, even if it's a problem, is it dangerous for them to do that now when they still have won 75% of their games? Like, obviously, any roster move can be a gamble in that sense. Was it the right time to make the move?
Personally, I think it is the right time to make the move. And if you remember when there was a very underperforming player named Glebe in the summer split of last year, because TSM was really trying to concentrate on winning NA and being able to put on a strong performance at Worlds, that this was seen as a necessary step to replace this player, even though they were still looking like a upper 50% team, right? I don't think it's enough for TSM, for their management to just sort of place in the somewhat upper echelons and then move on from there. I think they expect more, and it was a sort of a wake-up call at MSI going in. And I think that probably Keith will provide an upgrade at that position, honestly, at this point.
Upgrade in what sense?
I think that he's just a better player, fundamentally. And from the time we saw him on Liquid last year, I think he will have some rough spots at first. But if they're confident that this experience and him being in the TSM house and that environment will be able to kind of put him over the hump, as it were, so that they could have a stronger team at World, I see there's more upside. Here's the thing about Turtle. We know what Turtle's upside is. We know what his ceiling is. We've seen it. And it's not that high. It isn't. So he's been somewhat reliable, but even then, he has more bad games than I think you'd like to see from an AD carry from a top team, or has more moments where that is actually a big problem, where he can lose games for you, especially in late game team fights. If he mispositions once, that can be huge. So I think that you have to at least look somewhere. And TSM, there aren't that many places to look, right? Players who are not signed, players who other teams are willing to give up at this stage. And so I think you just kind of, you take your risk here. You do.
So here's the problem I see, though, Monty, in this whole scenario, is that it's being billed as we're doing this for Worlds. Like, for the team to have a chance at Worlds, we have to make this move. That's where I don't quite follow the logic and the reasoning, okay? If the reasoning was, at the moment, TSM isn't even doing, like, we're not even top of NA LCS, and to even win NA LCS again, we need to make a change that improves us in some way. Okay, I can buy that change. Maybe this move will make TSM win NA LCS. My problem is, I think it will be a negligible effect on their Worlds performance.
That's probably true.
Like, I was actually thinking this the other day. I probably should have said it before Wild Turtle was benched or whatever. But I actually think even the lineup they had with Wild Turtle, if they send either the lineup with Wild Turtle or the lineup with Keith, who admittedly I haven't seen play yet for TSM, if I had to guess, if that team went to Worlds, even if it went as the number one NA LCS seed, I don't think it would get to the playoffs if it was the same format as last year. Because you have to remember, last year, there was the benefit of they didn't have a Korean team. Remember, even if you're the number one seed in NA LCS, it's possible you can now get the second seed from Korea, the third seed from China or whatever. You can still have a group that's going to be hard to get out of. So if you get the wrong bracket draw, the wrong group draw, I don't think that either of those two TSM lineups would make it out into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that I think that they have to look primarily at winning NA and doing well domestically again. But I think that even a negligible difference, if Keith is an improvement over Wild Turtle and allows them to more comfortably win the NA LCS, at that point they will do. They're going to do probably better than they would with Turtle at Worlds if his performance doesn't improve.
That could be. But that's my problem I see, is that when I look at TSM, okay, so the TSM IEM is a different beast to the TSM at the previous Worlds. The TSM IEM looked very good, and the shot calling very good, and the mid game was very crisp. That was all great. That TSM does not exist anymore. I haven't seen that TSM since then. Even towards the end of the season. Okay, they kind of had it still towards the end of the NLCS playoffs, but ever since then, it's never been seen. The MSI one, I'm not going to go ridiculous and be like, oh, it'll be the same as MSI, because I actually feel like MSI, I can't even judge their team because I never saw their team. I just saw them take their best player who was carrying them in like 70% of games on hard carry champions, never give him a hard carry champion anyway. And now within that context, I can criticize him and say I don't think he even played those utility champs that well, but he never got to play the champs that you'd want him on in this scenario. So my big problem with TSM is, I still think Bjergsen's very good. Like, I still think he can have matchups against these teams I'm talking about where he could win a best of one game or he could do well. The problem is, what other position do they have a world-class player at? The closest is Lost Boy. And even then, some of these other teams, second best Chinese team, second best Korean team, some of these teams could have a player as good or better than him. So at the carry roles, top lane and Eddie carry, I think it's very unlikely they can face a team where they have any advantages at those two positions. And most likely, even Bjergsen won't be like a big edge, if anything, on the mid lane that they're playing. So it's hard to know where TSM... And remember, that's why I purposely said the context of they don't have this great shot calling anymore. So how are they going to win the game? They don't have the players, they don't have the style, they don't have... Where's the strength, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's what we were talking about earlier with the rise of this this kind of very dominant meta when it comes to top laners and the flexibility that you have to have. And this isn't only a problem for TSM, clearly. The NA region as a whole really has a big issue right now in that there isn't a top laner that you could really point to and say, this guy is world-class, or this guy is going to be the one who can really compete with some of these very good Chinese and Korean top laners. I mean, you kind of go down the list of top laners that might be at Worlds from Korea and China, and they include guys like Marin, Koro, Flandre, Smeb, Acorn, Trace, Someday, like Duke. There isn't anyone in NA that remotely compares to any of these guys. And in a meta where that top lane flexibility is so important, where you can create many more different compositions, if the bigger your top laner's champion pool is right now, because the junglers have the tankiness and the supports have the tankiness now to provide that front line or to provide the engage, the more flexibility that you have with your top laner, it massively opens up the number of team compositions that your team is capable of running. And the strategy there is, I mean, it's pretty freaking important, I think, right now. Now, it could change before Worlds. It definitely could. But Dyrus has improved this season. He has. He's playing better. But is he playing better enough that it's going to make a big, big difference? I think the answer is no.
So you're telling me that Trace, who we're going to pick out of that group, is in theory the worst at the moment, okay, of all the names you listed, of the Korean ones. So to you, Trace is better than Quaz, Impact, he's better than all these players in NA.
I think Impact is probably the closest. Quaz has had, TL, we can talk about TL later. TL has its own problems. Quaz is probably Quaz and Impact are, I think, probably tops in NA. Zion's been playing pretty well too. And Quas is known for having a big champion pool. But the thing about Team Liquid is that their team play right now is really not very good. And so they're kind of under a different factor.
Okay.
A little bit.
So what about Impact then? If Impact goes there, he can't compete with Trace.
I just don't think that Impulse is going to be getting a spot to Worlds.
Okay. Monty, what if Gamsu went?
No.
Lord Gamsu.
No.
So, okay.
But anyway, you compare that to Europe, and honestly, guys like Huni, I mean, Huni is so freaking good.
It gets a bit thin once you get past Huni, though.
Odo Omne is pretty solid.
Soaz? He's still around there?
Yeah, so I just think there's...
Got a couple.
Yeah, I think they have a better opportunity to kind of show up.
Cabo Shard, I guess, is in that group with Soaz.
Yeah.
And Odo Amne. So, yeah, okay, there's a few, I guess. But I don't know about that, though. Like, to me, I think Impact and Quaz are probably around the same level as the Soaz, Odo Amne, Cabo Shards.
Yeah, I suppose it's really just Huni.
He's just like above the rest. Okay. So, that's TSM. Now, with this move and with their current form at the moment, I get the feeling, Monty, like deep down, you need TSM to be good. Because, like me, you can't really put your faith in CLG yet. You need to see more. Doesn't matter how good the first part goes.
Yeah.
You know Dignitas is Dignitas. And Gravity and Liquid, listen, it's still Curse and Gravity, so... Let's not get crazy. So TSM has to be the one true good team. Like, they will bear this out and finish top, right?
One would think, and TSM has a history of identifying these roster issues and fixing them in the past, like Glebe for Lustboy. Now, they can't. I think the big problem is, well, it's not even a big problem. Well, the problem is that they need replacements at like you said, they only have Bjergsen and Lustboy, who you can point to and say, wow, I'd really like to keep both of these guys on the roster, right? Everyone else is a little bit expendable, as it were. But right now, due to their international restrictions, they actually, I believe, can't get any more international players. And that means that they have to look internally.
So they couldn't have replaced Wild Turtle with a foreign AD carry?
Correct.
Okay.
As far as I understand the rules to work.
In that case, maybe some of these AD carries I know from Europe have the wrong info then, because some of them say that they tried to contact TSM and be like, you should recruit me like a while ago, and that TSM was like, no, we're not interested. And if I told you some of these names, let's go ahead and just say that they're better than Keith, by the way. So, okay.
But they have Bjergsen, Santorin, and
okay,
Lustboy.
is Bjergsen not considered a resident now after all these splits?
I think
this is his fourth
he's
split.
grandfathered in, but you can only have 2 foreign players, and they have Santorin and Lustboy. So I'm pretty sure that TSM can't do that.
Okay, you might be right then. Okay.
So in any case, that means you have to look for domestic players. Well, we just talked about the talent pool in NA being not so great for top lane. So who are you going to find that's not signed to a team where another team's going to be willing to give up?
Wait a minute, you can only have 2 foreign players?
Yeah.
Then how does that work for like TDK, etc.?
Because Seraph is grandfathered in.
Okay, yeah.
Kez is American. Then they have an American support, and then Ninja and Emperor are their 2 players.
Okay, so everyone from the summer season is grandfathered in.
Yes, I believe so.
So let me think. So that's how Dignitas is able to have Helios, etc.
Correct.
You can only have two known. Okay, I think I've got it there. It's just that there's so many teams that do have.
I know
more than
it's
that many
so
queens.
it's like so
difficult to know,
wacky, and it like depends on when they started in the league and all this other garbage.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's weird, but I think that's true. But in terms of immediately upgrading at ADC is a kind of plug and play position. That's just mostly mechanical, so it's easier to find replacements, and it's not the same kind of dire scenario where there really aren't that many good. There's enough AD carry talent in NA, I think, to justify swapping out Wild Turtle. The Dyers and Santorin questions are a little harder.
Like, to me, at the moment, the big problem TSM has, aside from what I just said about all the issues for Worlds, which admittedly is months away, but as we stand right now, when they don't have this great mid-game, they don't have great shot calling, to me, the problem with the Keith thing is, I don't think it'll make a difference. Like, I think he might be like a mild upgrade in as much as he's more of a team-focused AD carry. He's not going to do stupid moves, in theory. But even so, Wild Turtle actually had a decent skill level at times, so I think it'll be fairly negligible, and the TSM story will still be the one big advantage we have is our mid lane is better than every other mid laner by far. If he dumps us completely, then we win the game, and they'll go as far as Bjergsen takes them. So I don't think it'll change in that sense.
It's hard to argue with that.
So going beyond TSM, here's an interesting point for you, by the way, Monty. You know, on a past episode, I pointed out that because High left and they brought Incarnation in. First of all, you don't know if Incarnation will work out, so they might have to replace Incarnation. But it also opens the door eventually that once you break kind of the dam, well, now if things go badly, maybe you replace other players as well. Maybe you bring in a really good support player, or maybe you bring in a good top player, whatever. What we hadn't thought of, Monty, is it goes the other way as well. If C9 does really badly, and they do really badly consistently, one day there might actually be the possibility that TSM can recruit Meteos. TSM can recruit Sneaky. These players might actually be available. And remember, they're NA players, which is the key part.
Yeah.
That could actually happen if you think about it. It's not unrealistic.
Definitely could.
The thing is, with their players, I would assume it wouldn't happen after one split. Like, unless some of them secretly are rages, which, by the way, isn't unrealistic. They just happen to have been winning a lot before and always got it together. So you had no reason, as a public person, to ever find out they were rages. But assuming people aren't rages, as they are in a lot of the NA and EU LCS teams, where if they have a bad split, they all go to... it becomes like Lord of the Flies or something. They all split up. Assuming that doesn't happen, okay... Split one, I could give them that they could do badly and all stay together because they might be like, hey, you know, Jack did such a great job for us and he's taking care of us. I won't leave the team. But if they do badly like 2 splits in a row or something like that, or miss Worlds, that's where I think those people would at least start to think about it, or the offers would come for them, and maybe now someone says, "Hey, well, it's my career, and maybe I'm only going to play." They always have these great excuses, by the way, players who leave. I think I'm only going to play one more split anyway, so like I'd kind of like to just in the short term, like try a different team out or something. Then they go to that team and just stay there for like 3 years. I know how league players work, buddy. I know the excuses that I'm giving you now. So going beyond TSM. Let's go to the team that is top of the league. CLG is 7-1. This might be the best CLG has ever been in terms of they're literally top of the league, clear, not even tied with anyone, and they've only lost one game. And
they're actually looking the best too. It's not just that they're at the top of the heap; it's that they actually look like the best team.
And their only loss was the classic standard CLG loss to TSM, which looked like every other TSM CLG game I've seen for the last 2 years. What do you actually think? Is this the time, Monty, where you give in? You know how I am a cynical person, Monty. If I see patterns, etc., until it's shown otherwise, I won't just buy into that. Have you already? Have you signed up for the CLG bandwagon? Is it time? Do you have faith? Is that why you're still here? Have you bought a ticket for the golden age? Why are you so reticent to tell me yes?
Because I know how the razor cake works, Thorin. I know that it looks extra delicious this season, and I want to eat the cake, but I still know that every other time I've eaten the cake, there's been a razor in there.
But Aframu is having such a good regular season, it surely will carry over to the playoffs.
I think that CLG, they now look much, much stronger in terms of their team fighting, which I think was their primary weakness last season. And Pobelter, I think, is doing a very good job in the team. I think that turned out to be a good pickup for them. So with their team fighting issues solved, they at least, I think, stand a much better chance than last time at taking number one. I think they look like, if you had to ask me right now, who is the best team in NA, I think CLG looks the most well-rounded. Their shot calling has been okay. Their team fighting has been much better. Their solo lanes their laning phase is obviously looking pretty strong. So this team to me is more the complete package. I mean, if we go down the ranks, we look at TSM, whose team fighting has been really, really off and kind of bad. And their laning phase hasn't been that strong outside of Bjergsen. Dignitas, I think that record is not reflective of their actual skill, considering that they have kind of won some games that were a little bit too close for comfort, including the TL games. Gravity just looks kind of mediocre. Team Liquid, which is a team that everybody's hyping so hard right now, is a team, whenever I watch them, I look at them and I say, these guys have strong laning phase and they have strong individual players, but their team coordination, their objective control, their side wave control is terrible. So they play the map pretty badly.
In terms of Pobelter's addition to CLG, this is one that's a bit confusing to me because he is doing well, but I don't really feel like it's like a star move. Like, to me, I mean, first of all, Link used to do decently as well in the regular season. That was fine. But to me, if anything, what it's helped is now they actually put proper focus on top lane. Like now, to me, Zion and Doublelift are like the carries of the team. You know, they're the two that I expect to do very well and have very good matchups against everyone. Whereas before, maybe because Link had any kind of, say, in shot calling or strategy, they still sometimes veered towards that mid and AD to me.
Well, I think that Pobelter's performance, I mean, even when Link was doing fine in terms of his results in the regular season, his team fighting was really not there. And I pointed out that a lot, what he could have done differently, and the VOD reviews that I did on my stream and stuff about where I thought Link's weak points were. So I saw that beforehand, but I'm not seeing that with Pobelter right now.
Okay. What do you think about Zion Spartan? It does seem like there's something different, because remember, the problem last season was he would even have good games, but it's like he was just on a different page than the whole other team. Like, he would be going in when his jungler wasn't there, or the team wouldn't follow up when he did. It felt like they were just totally disconnected. Is that different this season?
I think he looks much more integrated, and I think that a lot of that is going to be the result of what they've said, the team has said, in terms of their changes in shot calling. If you remember, where they said that Zion and Afro were doing the shot calling instead of Link and Afro, like it had been in previous seasons. So since Afro, I think, has more control over the pace of the game, or I mean Zion, then maybe that's also just integrating him into the team better.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have to talk about Dignitas, Monty, because here's the problem, okay? I want to set it up first. Every other week I asked you about Dignitas, Monty. You went to the record. You were like Bush when he was talking about Kerry in that second election. He was like, look at his record, though. Like you were like saying, oh, but look, they only have the wins over the weaker teams. Now, Monty, they've beaten Cloud9, Tip, Liquid, and TSM. At this point in time, they've got about as good a record as you could have, even for someone with a 6-2 record. So, why aren't you hopping on here? I want to give you an out here, Monty. Don't Unicorns of Love yourself again. When you did that, you've never quite recovered, and at the moment, you're just doubling down that Unicorns of Love shits the bed so hard this season, you sort of recoup some of those losses. Like, don't chase money that's already gone, Monty. Don't fall into the gamblers.
No, Dignitas problem. Is not. First off,
why aren't Dignitas a good team? Isn't the sign of winning games that are out of control and you shouldn't win them, but you do it again and again? That's like Cloud9 right there. Is Dignitas the new Cloud9?
No, I feel that they just keep getting by on other teams making massive errors, and it's kind of just like a crapshoot when they do win a game, and that they've flipped the coin a few times and it's come up heads more than tails. That's how I feel about them. I think that with Helios they're probably going to settle down into somewhere within the like 4 to 6 range, but I think them winning the season would be extremely surprising.
I've got a question for you then. So, at the moment, they are 6 to 8 games played. There are 10 games remaining. Give me a guess as to what you would imagine their record in the next 10 games should be. They still have to play CLG, by the way. Oh, no, they don't. I've actually played them. It's Enemy they haven't played. So it's Enemy and then everyone else won.
6-4.
Okay. So they would be 12-6 overall. That's probably playoffs. Let me think what that would be.
It's probably playoffs. Maybe if they do go 6-4 at this point because they've done so well already, maybe they can actually, be third or fourth. But I think that a team that is lower seeded them in the playoffs has every opportunity to upset them and take it.
So essentially, if I'm getting the haterism correct,
the haterade.
Even if Dignitas places third or fourth, Monty says they are weaker than all the teams that place below them but make the playoffs.
Maybe not all. It'll depend on matchup, but I would say there's a good chance that might be a true statement.
So let me play devil's advocate here. Dignitas gets Helios, and the complaint Pobelter had about Helios was that he only wanted to gank side lanes. Now in Dignitas, that's a dream come true. Our mid laner plays like a frightened little schoolgirl who's up past midnight and the mistress might be coming along any minute with check if lights are out. He doesn't need any jungle help anyway. Meanwhile, the top laner's the best player in the team, and it's a top lane meta, and the AD carry, he just plays super aggro anyway. Isn't this a good pairing?
Yeah. And when I said Dignitas was going to be 10th, this was prior to these.
You're invoking the Lord Loco Doco clause here.
Yes, that's right.
You can't be held accountable for things you said before the circumstances changed drastically. Well, before, it's the same scenario, Monty. You can't be held accountable for predictions made about a team before they added an MLG and OGN champion. It's the same exact scenario, actually.
Exactly the same scenario.
That's the fine print there on that. Should it improve them enough, though? Like, this is like the most tenuous haterism I've ever heard. Not only are you saying like now you're like, what? I mean, they're not even that good. I'm like, okay, but they did like already sort of cheat and win those games, so I guess they're already ahead. And now that they have a head start, I mean, they did like upgrade slightly at jungle, so I guess they'll just be like, all right. How did you get there from just like hating them completely? They must be all right then, okay?
Yeah, they're okay. I think they're going to be an okay team. I just don't see them as these, like... I think they've gotten overhyped. That's all.
Is there something good that they're doing in their games to win these games?
Um, I just think back to like the TSM Dignitas game, and I think back to the Dignitas Team Liquid game, and I just see so many ways for TSM to beat Dignitas in these games, and I felt more that TSM and Team Liquid were both just playing horribly, and that Dignitas. The NA is so bad right now. I think that's the real frustration for me, is that all of the teams have some pretty glaring flaws. And so maybe I just expect more out of Team Liquid and TSM, and I should readjust my expectations, because the Team Liquid game, basically Dignitas's composition with this Lulu and this Corki and this top lane assassin Jarvan was funny. But there was basically only one way they could win a team fight. And why the comp is bad is because if Jarvan misses the EQ combo, if he misses a skill shot, you can't blow up their back line, and then you just instantly lose the team fight. When it works, it looks freaking cool. Like we saw, EQ in, jump in with Cataclysm while growth goes down on him, and then the back line just gets annihilated. And it was fun to watch. It's just, that's the Dignitas' playstyle. They pick something that isn't reliable, and they managed to win with it in a very sloppy game that they had to pull out of their ass with legitimately a good teleport from Gamsu at the last second. But it's like the escalation that it takes to get there is kind of unbelievable.
Not to go totally like mentalist / Sherlock style, but here's going to be my... See, I'm like Monty, but instead Monty had to find other ways he could go advanced in his haterism. My level is going to be so abstract that people are going to be like, what the fuck, that's a reach, but you ready? I'm going to do it, okay. So the reason why I think that even Dignitas themselves know they're not this good is that when you see teams win a game, when teams actually are the best teams in the league, winning most regular season games, especially against lesser teams, they can't even put on a fake act that they're really happy. Like, if TSM beats, like, Team 8, they'll just sort of be like, high five, like, half-hearted, half hug, and then be like, yeah, good game, or whatever, man, and then, like, go and shake hands, like, because they've got so many games to play. Likewise, okay, there was a CSGO tournament recently where Fnatic, who's the best team overall, was playing, and the only team who can beat them wasn't at the tournament. And so when they won this tournament undefeated, not even with their best performance, they won like 20k, and they just sort of stood up like, yeah, cool, yeah, like high five. Good job, man, because they've won so many tournaments, you know, this one doesn't matter to them. So teams that actually know they're that good, eventually it becomes your everyday reality. You're just that good, you're supposed to win. Every win Dignitas has, every one is like they just won Game 7 of the NBA Finals, you know, like they're hugging. Shifter, who doesn't normally smile at all, has got this huge smile on his face. Not only that, they're even giving those sort of like apologetic hugs to the opponent, like, come here, man, I know I stole this one from you, but my kids need to eat as well, so I got to get that money, man, you know, like, they're just like, they know they stole them, they know there's something wrong going on here, and they're like, I don't know how I keep getting away with this, but like, it's like that thing, okay, in tennis, if someone like Roger Federer hits a really insane but really lucky shot, like okay, it takes skill to do, but it's really lucky, and even he knows, like, I mishit it and it went like in slightly and just was impossible to re-hit, they even will look over at the opponent, right, and give sort of like a cheeky smile, like, sorry, like, I know that was kind of bullshit, like, it's unfair for you. That's what the smiles on Dignitas players are like. It's like they're even sort of like, how am I getting away with this? I hope this lasts forever. They're like Wile E. Coyote or someone who's ran off a cliff, and if they look down at any point, Monty, it's over for them. So that is the most abstract haterism. When you combine our two segments there, if Dignitas wins the league or comes top 2 now, I don't know if we're ever going to live this one down. Like, this might be the worst one we've ever had. I mean, Unicorns of Love almost did us in, but like, this might be the worst. Isn't Gamsu pretty good?
Yeah, Gamsu is pretty good.
But how do you actually rate him, though? Because I notice now, if there's one thing people love, Monty, it's if people love to be the first to get a ticket to the anti-circle jerk bandwagon. So now everyone's like, but you guys all said Gamsu and Hauntzer weren't the best players. And it's like, yes, continue. Did you say they were the best? Yeah, I always thought they were the best, but you guys would have downvoted me, so I had to keep that opinion to my, that sort of stupid opinion. Like, where does Gamsu actually rank as a top laner in NA?
I would say below Zion, Quas, and Impact. So I don't know, 4 to 6, somewhere in there.
Has he actually improved as a player? Was he the same player last split?
I think he actually did show some upside last split, but he wasn't as consistent in it as he is this time around, and I think he's showing better decision making.
Okay, so CLG, Dignitas, TSM. Now the two teams who are below that threesome, both on a 5-3 record, Gravity and Team Liquid. It's the two cursed teams, Monty. Now it sounds like you're not a fan of either of them. Like, I actually like Liquid. I think they have some strong players. The problem with Liquid is their style doesn't look very good. But I still feel like they're the roster where, out of all the rosters at the moment, bearing in mind TSM should be pretty good anyway, CLG's doing well. To me, TL's the one that should join those two with the talent they have if they get it together.
Yes, but that's always the question with TL, right? Do they ever get it together? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I've read this like cursed Team Liquid story a million times before.
Like, I still don't understand. Think about this. I'm not a fan of Phoenix. I don't think he's that good. But he doesn't need to be good. Look at the team. They have, in theory, the best jungle top combo. I guess Tip, in theory, can rival them for that. But they have a good 2v2 top and jungle, especially as that's meta now. And then their bot lane looks awesome on paper. It's like Special and Piglet. Like, though they should be winning 2 of the lanes every game. What's the problem?
They do win lane, right? That isn't the problem. They win lane a lot. They do well a lot. But the problem is that their coordination as a team is just not good. I mean, they have such issues when it comes to controlling their side waves and when it comes to, pretty much everything. Like, they just don't look very strong with their communication or their teamwork. And something weird is going on there. You'd have to imagine.
So when they lost to Dignitas, no, wait a second. Who am I thinking of now? I'm thinking of someone else. Okay, so the other team is Gravity that I want to ask you about. So Gravity, when they lost to TSM in that game, Monty, this was like a perfect example of why Keen will always be overrated. Because when he has the 1 or 2 games on the weird pick that look awesome, people think like, wow, if you can do that on champions that aren't even main meta now. Well, now, Urgot's in theory been meta for a while. So he played Urgot. His Urgot, remember, he's the one who introduced it. And he went like 0-9-11 and Bjergsen's Azir shit on him massively. Like, what is Gravity's upside? Do they just stay around where they are now?
I think they're just going to stay around where they are now. I don't think that we have... The upside, I think, is Alltech has actually been performing pretty well. And we saw that in the game, but...
Yeah, he was in Elo Hell in that game.
Just talking...
Him and Hansa were in Elo Hell in that game, mate.
Just talking about Gravity and TSM, it's like... It's just the problem with NA. Why is that game a 50-minute long horrible mess, right? What happened to the crisp play that we used to see from TSM? What happened to their shot calling and their great lane swaps? Like, where did it go?
Do you want to know,
same roster.
You want to know something interesting, Monty? The one thing everyone always praises NA for is that they've got more money and they've got more structure and they've got a better infrastructure of coaches and analysts and all these things. In Europe right now, there are 2 teams. You can take Fnatic and H2K, who play awesome. The style is awesome. Forget the players. Yeah, they have some good players. The style is exactly what you want for those compositions of teams. Then... okay, Origin isn't some world beater. They have issues, but okay, they have a decent style for what they play. Well, these are the people who've only recently got these coaches. These are brand new coaches. These are brand new teams, even building up their infrastructure. How have these teams overtaken all of NA?
I don't know. It's you would think that with a lot more rookie players in Europe as well, there would be some other issues surrounding that, but apparently there aren't.
Cloud9 is 2-6. Tell me something. Cloud9.
Ball.
Wait a second. Yeah, keep going.
Balls has been really bad this season.
Your mic is dying. Why is that happening?
When we look at Balls in previous seasons, and we talk about Balls and how critical he was to the success of C9, he just simply has not shown up. I mean, his team fighting, and I criticized Cloud9 for this actually at IEM San Jose, where I was looking at C9 team fight and Balls was doing a lot of the wrong things, and he just hasn't been able to do much of anything out of the top side in these games. So they've got this mid who's adjusting, They then have this top laner who's seriously underperforming, and it's lining up to a hell of a lot of problems right now.
So here's the problem, is that the best player still is Sneaky, right? But here's the issue. Another spoiler for you. I actually asked Sneaky in my interview with him, which is forthcoming on HTC eSports YouTube channel. So in that interview, I actually said to him, are you someone where, depending on the sort of support play you have, that's how you'll adapt your style of play? And one of the outs I'm giving him when I say it like that, by the way, Monty, is if he really does think Cloud9 is like the dream team and he should never break it up or whatever, he can just be like, I only look strong because of the way I play with Lamination, and, we should never change that. He actually basically said, like, what I suspected anyway, which is like, no, well, if I had like a really aggressive lane support, then I'd probably play I could play really aggressively, I could be like a lane dominant AD carry. So I think that's another area where if Cloud9 does badly this split, that's another place you have to look. Now, the downside of that was, in Lamination's interview, another spoiler, he said that he wouldn't retire unless things went completely shut. So essentially he'll just play until they crowbar the mouse out of his hands. So all I'm saying is, put the two together. Put it this way, hard decisions coming for Cloud9. It's easy to give an organization props, like, wow, you kept the same team together and all this stuff. Yeah, you always got it together. You always won. You always succeeded. I want to see what an org does when things go to shit, when players have to be removed, who actually we love, this is a guy that I really want in the team, and he's been with us from day one, but I have to remove him. That's when you'll see the really good business decisions, unfortunately. Props to all the rest of it, but I want to see what happens at the end of that type of a split, because at the moment, do they turn it around, Monty? 10 games to go?
I don't think so. I think they're too far behind right now, and that their playoff run would be very, very difficult. I think this is going to be the first year that we don't see Cloud9 making Worlds, since they became a top team. Even though they got all those circuit points, I think they're going to kind of, if they squeak into the playoffs at all, it'll obviously probably be in the 5th or 6th seed, and then they're going to have such a hard run that they're not going to get the most circuit points. They're not going to. Oh man, what if they do? Actually, what if they do get the most circuit points? Let me look at the circuit points. That might actually be interesting. So C9 has 70 right now. But there are more points you get 90 for second place. So if Cloud9 gets even something like 5th, 6th place, they have 90 circuit points. Ooh. That might actually mean that they auto-qualify for Worlds.
No, because I think, unless I'm mistaken, I'm remembering this somehow, I think if there's a tiebreaker, then it goes on summer performance or something. Something like that, I think. Unless I'm mistaken, I think there's something along those lines where it was skewed in some sense.
Let me look that up. I'm going to look it up, see what the tiebreaker is. The team that gained the most points this summer split will be considered the tiebreaker. You're correct. They won't actually. It's weird that they won't play a tiebreaker best of 5 for that, because that's what we do in Korea.
So they probably have to finish top 4 to get ahead of. Obviously. TSM was the only team that finished ahead of them last split, so they probably have to finish top 4 to ensure auto qualification.
Yeah, but if they finish top 4, I think that they would not be a very strong team going into the World Championship. That could actually really affect NA.
Is there anyone out of the bottom teams that you care about anymore? Have you just given up on Tip?
Yep.
The fuck? You just hop up. You hate Dignitas with such venom for so long. You just straight off that Tip bandwagon. Yeah, letters. I actually don't think Rush is that great anymore. Bye.
No, I like Impact and Rush, and I just think Impulse is probably going to be, at this point in time, I don't see them really improving that much with the language issues in the team and the fact that they still, after, I thought that maybe towards playoffs and towards the end of that year, we were starting to see a more reliable style out of Impulse, but it still looks a lot like solo queue when I watch them. I mean, they're really good solo queue players, but I'm not sure that there's much more depth to them.
People always say that, their bot lane's underrated, Apollo, he's just a really good cleanup style, plays very safe, stable, all this stuff. Do you buy it?
I think he's a very average AD carry. I don't see anything really special about him. I think he does his job on the team, which is to follow up on Rush and Impact and Xiao Zhao.
So, okay, let's just do some... Let me think. Actually, you haven't got very much time. Should we just do LCK and skip Europe? What do you want to do?
I mean, we... Actually, Korea really wasn't that interesting this last week. There weren't very many good games, honestly. The CJ Najin...
Okay, then just give me the basic summary, which is that you hyped this week as the week that will end all weeks or whatever.
It's going to be a really good week this week in terms of determining who... Because we have so much parity, I think, between everybody under SK Telecom up until about 6th place. And this week it's KT, SKT, Jin Air, Najin, Najin, KT, SKT, Jin Air. So there's some really good matches that are going to tell us a lot more, I think, about these teams, particularly teams like KT and Jin Air, who haven't been doing that well recently.
Well, you know, the sick one is that Najin has a tied record with all of them. So you could easily think, oh, well, I guess Najin, they're getting it together. No, you have to remember, Najin's the one that out of nowhere lost that set to Anarchy. So actually one of their losses is one that shouldn't even exist.
Well, it was their first match of the season, and it did look like they were not taking them seriously.
So can you, you saw how fast he jumped off the tip bandwagon there. Do you want to get onto the Najin bandwagon? To me, Najin's like the liquid of that region. They have the players where I'm like, how is this team not winning?
They totally are the liquid of that region. They've gotten better in terms of their team play and their strategy. I think that Ku and SKT are quite good right now, and then Jin Air, KT, Najin are all pretty good, and CJ are all pretty good. But I don't really know how that is going to shake out in terms of performance. I really need to see this next week.
Okay. What I do love though, Monty, I like it when I see these little trends happening there. So I was always saying CJ's pretty good, Monty. They have a way of playing people close, and in the end, they almost got to the final. This season, you were so down on Ku early on. You were like, these guys are. You're coming round, right? They're starting definitely to look pretty good.
Well, I think that the big change,
especially Prey got actually decent again out of nowhere.
Well, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Ku Tigers, their players, started solo queuing a lot more, and Gorilla and Prey are 4 and 5 on the Korean ladder right now, and all of their players, I think, are in the top 20 or so. Smeb was as high as number 2, number 1 at times. And I think that the Ku Tigers, once they fixed their laning phase and once they started playing a lot more solo queue and working on their mechanics, even Kuro's gotten much more dangerous. So
he's back from the dead?
Yeah. He's been doing really well this season. Do I think he's as good as Faker? No. But do I think he is significantly improved? Yes. So the Ku Tigers, even when they were doing badly, they never lost their great shot calling or their side wave control or their ability to put pressure on objectives. They just found themselves these massive holes because they got slammed in the early game. And now we're seeing that they have really stepped up in the laning phase. And so now they still have all their strengths, but they actually have lead laning phase. That's leading to...
Oh, your mic went out again.
That's just leading to much more dominant play, having the lead out of the laning phase coupled with their strong shot calling.
Okay. Right, let's do a little bit of EU then to wrap up, so you haven't got that long. So, over in EU. Okay, so first things first, Fnatic reigns Imperious still.
Yes. Origin is a team that I think has a lot of strong parts, and that if they play aggressively, and if they can just outplay opponents early, they're good at snowballing that win. But Origin is a team that's also shown that when they go behind early, they keep on taking fights, whether it's not a good idea or not, like we saw against Roccat and like we saw against Fnatic, and they don't know really how to trade objectives. So I think they're solid in that not many teams can individually outplay them in Europe, so they should continue to do pretty well.
Here's something about Origin that I want to bring up, though, is that one thing I found quite depressing is I thought one of the great things about Origin coming back is the return of XPeke. Now we get to see how would Febev and these newer guys, or people who haven't played LCS before, how would they do against XPeke? Power of Evil, Soren, Ryu. you haven't really seen it, because actually what's interesting is, okay, so an old debate that I'll now reignite is like everyone who thinks I overrate Froggen is almost inevitably, Monty, a massive Xpeke fanboy, and they think he's the best mid laner. So you notice it's never quite honest how they're only attacking me on my ground. They don't bother to explain their ground, okay? So the problem is, Xpeke of Season 4 had times where he was quite weak in some of the regular splits. He wasn't the great player. In the playoffs, he picked it up every time. That's true. Internationally, dynamite. But actually, Xpeke of this split, Origin, the teams looked awesome. But actually, Xpeke doesn't even play like Xpeke anymore. He doesn't play that outplay
he's
you
been
1v1
playing
styles.
like very reserved.
It's quite
a lot of control mages.
It's
like
strange. But they're still winning though, so it's working. But it's just, you don't expect that, because I thought, it's going to be solo lane dominance again,
I think it's suiting them so far. I don't really have an issue with that. I don't think that's their primary problem at the moment.
Just an interesting point to note, I thought.
Yeah,
because the obvious corollary for someone who hadn't watched it is like, if Origin's doing well, Xpeke must be rocking it again. Whereas, actually, he's not even close to the best mid at the moment in Europe. So, is anyone going to stop Fnatic, aside from like a freak best of one loss? Like, is there someone out there who has the style of the players to do it?
Fnatic just looks very complete at the moment. They look very comfortable in their identity, and now that a lot of these players that they have are entering their second season, it seems like they're just really confident in their shot calling and their ability to control objectives. I think they look really, really good.
If Worlds was held today, where would Fnatic get?
I think that obviously it's hard to say because it's depending on the group and the way that everything shakes out and the brackets, but I was saying in my AMA that I think reasonably that Fnatic, a good finish for this year would be Fnatic reaching the semifinals. I think that would be, I don't think they will, but I think that they can.
Okay. So, I know H2K is your favorite European team, really, right?
Yeah, I love
Fnatic, the problem with Fnatic is some of their players just dumpster the game as well. And so I actually get why there's a bit of burnout for that. Like, unfortunately for me, this might sound harsh, but when I watch Huni dumpster everyone, there's a bit of the Bjergsen syndrome where I'm like, okay, that's great, but that wouldn't happen against all the best Asians at that position. So it's great, but I have to see him play them to really know how great he is as a player. I can't just put him up into their category, although I have him reasonably close because he's doing very well. But it means that the games don't, like, you don't get to see that much strategy sometimes out of Fnatic because some of their players dumpster.
Yes.
The H2K I don't know if H2K ever win a game without winning, like, as a team.
I mean, they do well in the laning phase. Obviously, I think Kasing has been playing really, really well for that team. But yeah, generally they win through having great drafts and having better play on the map. And
team fighting.
Yeah, I really like watching them play right now. They're very enjoyable.
Like, actually, what's funny is in that team, I think the best thing that Ryu's done in that team is just, he doesn't even have to be great in lane, doesn't have to be great on whatever he just has to team fight well. If he team fights well, they can win the game. And he's really good at that at the moment, on any champion. He is. So,
it's like the KT Bullets all over again.
He even managed, Monty, to play a mid Lulu and play well. So, I know how hard that is in your estimations. He even managed that.
So, I like watching H2K. I'm excited to see where they go.
So here's the bold question for you, Monty. Are you ready? So Giants and Unicorns of Love are kind of leveling out, mate. They're at 50% win rate. And you know who's one game behind them? Gambit Gaming. So where are you feeling with this threesome here, Monty? Is Gambit Gaming going to join and or surpass this group?
Ooh. I think Gambit's definitely looking better. And Gambit isn't a problem of talent. It's a problem of controlling that talent and making sure that it doesn't play Jungle Volibear and that it has computers to actually play League of Legends on, right? So I think they could make a comeback. I was excited about the prospect of this team on paper. So it seems like their training environment has leveled out some and maybe they can do something with it.
So Giants get Unicorns of Love both 50-50 right now. Does one of them like hold steady? Do they both hold this area?
I think they both hold steady from here on out.
So it just turns out that Giants are actually decent.
Yeah. I guess that's the world we live in. But Adra and Pepinera have both been carrying pretty hard for the team in those wins. So I think on an individual level, those players seem decent.
So Elements, Roccat, SK, no one figures it out. No one goes on some sick run in the last 10 and wins 7 or 8.
I can't believe in Roccat anymore, Thorin.
Why not? They've got Mr. Alice now. They've no more Woolite.
We've both believed in Roccat for too long. They're just radically inconsistent as to when they decide to show up and play.
The problem with Roccat is they're just the spoiler team. Like, they're just the team. They're like the complexity of last year's summer where they just win the one big game off the top team and you're like, oh my God, and then they lose the other game, so it doesn't matter anyway. The only good thing about Elements, Roccat, SK being bottom is that if they finish bottom, like that threesome there, I hope, for God's sake, that we will have the most epic shuffle of good talent out of those teams into other teams, or into those teams and make mega teams, because the amount of talent in those bottom 3 teams is fucking ridiculous, mate. Like, I could make out of those 3 teams a lineup that on paper could win Europe. I mean, I realise everyone now, every LCS fan, Monty, because they just follow results, is like, no, you couldn't. They're all losers who are all bad. Like, okay, mate, look, it's what, Sven Skeren, I guess Nuke Duck people will go crazy. Jankos, Vander, who else have we got? Tabs, Froggen. Even Freddy 122 to a degree still. We've still got some pretty good players in that mix.
Freeze.
Copenhagen Wolves, obviously, he's in the bottom 4. Freeze. Those are some pretty good players.
Those great players.
I mean, those players are better than almost everyone on fucking Giants Gaming and almost everyone on Unicorns of Love. And yeah, hate on that if you want, motherfuckers. I don't care. I don't care. Sven Skeren is better than Kikis. I don't care what the results say because they're not playing a 1v1 game. It doesn't work like that. It's not a 1v... Okay, so anyway, we can't go into this shit too deep because... Well, basically, I would normally just say the real thing, Monty, which is that you have to go now, and so we have to end the episode. But what I'll do instead, just to add like extra humiliation to the West, in like this is sort of like the penance moment, the shame moment of the West, if you will. So what are we gonna? The reason why we didn't have time to talk that much about EU, and we only had to do a little bit on NA, Monty, is because after MSI, you know, to be fair, we've had to reassess our priorities, and we spent more time on one of the top regions, LMS. We gave more time to them because they proved to be a lot better than a lot of the Western regions. You know, they had a top 4 at IEM, they had a top 4 at MSI, and so we gave more time to them. And in the future, when we have guests on from those little smaller regions, then we'll spend more time on those, you know, just as a courtesy. So until the next episode, if you like to think about good players and who you think's better than other players, and if a player's underrated, maybe you'd like to play Fantasy League of Legends on Alpha Draft. If so, then go to the links in the description box below and give me and or Monty, if he gives me the referral link money, and then we can play as well. Thank you. Goodbye.